Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Monica Yu, and I worked at Elan in the antibody discovery group with Robin, with Michael, and Puyi before. It was a pleasure working with them. So today I'll be talking about genetics ClonePix FL and how we incorporated this technology into our workflow to make our hybridoma facility more efficient and also more productive, and also how it helped us to overcome some common issues that we faced before the technology was brought into our facility. So let's see. So I'll be, give a brief basics about how the machine works and then how it compares to the traditional method of how we generate monoclonal antibodies and the advantages and also the concerns we had at that time. And also after it has been established in our facility, the general routine, how we used it. And I'll be given one example of this particular phosphoantibodies that we generated using the ClonePix. And then after that, there are two special applications of the ClonePix with what we so-called the rescue missions, which is to rescue the unstable clones and also select the high producers from a bunch of positive clones. So then I'll wrap up, and then we have a Q&A session. So let's talk about the ClonePix. So it is an instrument, as many of you probably already know, that automatically images, selects, and also picks the mammalian cell colonies based on a variety of different parameters. It could be size, roundness, and also closeness to the neighboring cells. Or you can rely on more quantitative information such as protein or IgG production. Excuse me. The machine can be used for cell screening for a variety of cell types, such as CHO cells, which we used ClonePix for, and also NSO, hybridoma, and most recently, the application was extended to B cells and also stem cells. In my talk, I'll be mainly concentrated on the hybridoma part, which I worked on using ClonePix in the last few years. So here is a picture of how it works. Hopefully you'll see it clearly. So this picture, I took it from Life Technologies. Obviously, they're probably one of the customers. And then, so we have this colony of cells growing very nicely as a little round ball in the semi-solid media. And then the protein or antibodies will be secreted out and get captured in the semi-solid media by the fluorescent labeled detection reagent and form a fluorescent precipitate around the colony. And that's what you're going to see, the halo under the imaging system. And then this, so this will be the imaging plane where the image is taking. So let's see the next. So let's see, this is in real life. So we have I'm not used to this. So we have one colony growing here as a discrete colony in the semi-solid media, and then antibody will be secreted out and then bind to the fluorescent labeled antigen or detection antibodies, and for example, peptide or proteins, and form the halo, which you're going to see on the next one. So this is what you're going to see on the imaging system. So here we can see this is the same colony under the micro fluorescent filter. You're going to see this precipitate out, giving the fluorescent halo. Okay, so we use, in our facility, we use two kinds of methods to pick the clones. First of all is to pick just the IgG producers. And the other one will be picking specific antibodies, which we'll be talking about on the next slide. So this slide shows a simple one, which we have the colony in the middle, secreting the antibody, which is blue right here. And in the semi-solid media, we have this clone detect agent, which is a fluorescent labeled anti-mouse IgG. And it will form this cross network, and then this will be the fluorescent labeled precipitate around the colony. This is how we pick just the IgG producer. And on this slide is a little different. This is when we want to pick a colony that secrete specific antibodies. So in this case, instead of using the fluorescent labeled anti-IgG, we label the antigen with a fluorophore. At the same time, we're adding this so-called complex initiation factor, which is CIF, and conjugate the clone detect. This is present in the media to help to form this network of precipitate. So after we have this fluorescent antigen present in the media, only the clone that secretes a specific antibody will have the halo around it. So this is definitely a more specific way to choose a clone. So now let's looking at what the clone pics look like. So we have a little bit older version of it now. It probably look a little bit different, but then it's still pretty good. So we have, of course, this is a machine. We have the operating chamber right here. This one can open up where you put the plates in. And then here's the alcohol bottle, connected tubes go into the chamber to desanitize the whole system. And we have the water bottle here and the waste. So this will pump the water to flush the tubing system, and the waste will come out from the other side. We have the compressor here, and we also have the computer with the image analysis software on them. So now let's look into the operating chamber. So, okay, I'm just going to see it. Okay, so we have, when you open it, this is what you see when you open it. We have the picking head here with 8 pins on it. And then we have 4 positions for 4 stackers. The back, these 2 stackers are for the source, what we call the source plate. This is where you put your cells seeded in the semi-solid media in. These could be either 6-well plates or a 1-plate big plate with like 1 big cell, big well in it. The front 2 racks, these are for what we call destination plates. So these are going to be the plates that after you pick the cells, where you're going to put the cells in. So these mostly are 96-well plates. So you can see now we have 1 6-well plate coming out here, and then get imaged and in this particular chamber, and then get analyzed, and we pick the selection criteria, and we tell the computer, okay, these are the clones we want to pick, and the pin will go down to this semi-solid media, pick the clones out, and then transfer them to the destination plate. So this is how it works. Okay, so our issues before we had the clone picks in our facility were like, okay, so the traditional hybridoma fusion and cloning process, they're very tedious and long and very labor intensive. And I'll give you a timeline later comparing them both. And we could not meet our company's demand for antibodies because we have to make antibodies towards therapeutic targets, biomarkers, and also in-house reagent to support multiple projects. We tried to outsource the antibody, but it did not really work that well for us. And also, for people that work with tissue cultures for a long time, the injuries, the repetitive injuries on the arms and hands and shoulder, neck, that could be a problem. I personally have some injuries. So these problems, all add up together, make us think trying to automate, certain steps of the hybridoma generation process will make our facility running more efficient and more smoother. So that's why we kind of bring the machine in and trying it. So ClonePix FL, it will automate both the screening and also the cloning process. It will increase our productivity and at the same time reduce the time and also the labor. The software is flexible enough to allow us to select different colonies based on our needs. We can see, depends on the size, the fluorescent intensity. It's really great. And it has this potential to rescue unstable clones and also to pick up the high producers. For these 2, I'll be giving an example of each later on in this talk, so you can see it works really nice. So this is our timeline prior we introduce the ClonePix. So normally after the fusion, it takes us 10 to 16 days to screen the clones and then to scale them up and then confirm that they're positive. And after that, we'll do the cloning by limiting dilution. And normally, if we're lucky, we have a stable clone. It will take about us a month to do limiting dilution to stabilize that clone. So that will make the time totally 1.5 months, and that will be 65 total man-hours. If we're unlucky, which is not uncommon, we get an unstable clone that keep kicking the antibody genes out, then it will take up to 90 days or even longer to try to stabilize that clone. And that will bring the time up to 3 months or even sometimes half a year to trying to get one nice clone out. And sometimes that normally, your best clone normally be the one that's unstable for some reason. So under these conditions, our time to produce a stable clone will be approximately 30 hours, and then to produce to stabilize an unstable clone will take us additional 15 hours. That's average. Would normally take longer than that. And this timeline was calculated based on 20 years of experience and over 500 fusions. You can see how tedious work it could be. So we brought in the ClonePix FL. We tried it for, I believe it was 6 months or more, and we did many fusions on it and cloning. So this is what we got. So after the fusion, it took about 7 to 14 days to screen and then confirm the positives. And then if we have a stable single cell, it only takes about 8 days to just stabilize it, because only need to do 1 round and then it grow up and that's it. We're done. So we only need about 22 days and 12 man-hours to just produce a stable clone. If they're unstable, okay, then we do 4 rounds of cloning. But that's only going to be us for like 32 days, a little bit over a month. So that will reduce the time to 46 days with a total man-hour 17. So with the ClonePix here, we screen a lot more colonies, up to 6,000, actually even up to 9,000 colonies at one time. This is fantastic. So the time for us to produce a stable clone is about 5 hours. Man-hour, so we literally operating on the machine and let the machine run and by itself, then it doesn't count. And then to stabilize the unstable clone, we need about an additional 10 hours, and that works really well. So we calculate that one ClonePix FL running 10 hours a day can handle about 30 to 40 fusions per year, including screening, including cloning of positives and stabilizing the unstable clones. And normally before we could only handle like up to 20, and both of us will be like overwhelmed. So this really works pretty well. The concerns we had back then, first of all, contamination, because in this chamber here, there's any ventilation or anything. So that's the first concern we had. But then after certain fusions, at least over 100 clonings, we didn't have any contamination issue. Of course, bear in mind, you have to do routine maintenance and sterilize it all the time. The cell grows in the semi-solid media. The cell actually grows much better in semi-solid media than in the liquid media. They actually grow really well. And also the adaptation. After we transfer the cells from the semi-solid media to the liquid media, we're kind of worried about the adaptation. They actually adapt pretty well. We did do one modification. I would recommend that if you transfer to a 96 well, we recommend you use 96 well round bottom, because that proximity of the cell, they actually will grow better than the flat bottom. And the manufacturing, we were worried about the performance, but it did perform. And the learning curve, of course, like any machines, that you introduce to the facility, it takes some time to get it up running, to learn the software. But I would say it take about 2 months to get pretty familiar with everything. But after that, it's running great. In the past few years, every year or two, we kind of get a software upgrade with new features. But if you know the basics, this is really just a cup of cake, no problem learning all that. Okay, so we established that, right? So now we have that running great in our facility. These are general procedures we have in our facility. The first one, like I told you, is just to pick IgG producers. So this is the one we use. So we have the hybridoma. We mix, which is a FITC labeled gold anti-mouse IgG, which is pretty much the clone detect agent, and this will form the precipitate, and that's how we pick the IgG producers. And then the next one will be picking Okay, so this one, the picture I showed you before, this one, instead of just picking the IgG producers, we pick the clones that secrete specific antibody, and then this one we use with like a protein that labeled it fluorescent, and then mixed with the CIF to help to form the network, and then we pick this colony. Both methods work really well for us. So, but if you're going to use like different reagents of that than what I mentioned above, every cell type, every region, fluorescent region you want to use, you need to optimize. Like even the cell density, you really need to optimize because, every cell, they grow differently. After that, we prepare the semi-solid media. We seed cells. They're either few cells or parental clones, and we prefer to seed them at lower density just to prevent possible overgrowth and depleting of the nutrients. And then we wait 4 to 7 days for cell to grow. And normally, I would say after 5 days, they're definitely ready to be picked. They grow really well in there. And then we pick colonies based on different parameters like intensity and proximity, etc. And then we rescreen if necessary. Excuse me? Okay. So the software that I was talking about earlier. So the software there, It have very flexible selection criteria, so it's like I talked to you about before, like the size, like the roundness, proximity. For fusion selection, for example, be concentrating mostly on the size and then on the high intensity, which indicate it is a high producer. And also, it will provide a clone ranking data, so that way you will know from all the clones that you look at, which one will be the top producer, which one will have for example, the highest effluence intensity. So that way you will be able to choose, especially when we want to pick, the clones that secrete most of the antibodies. I'll give an example on that. It will plot graphs for different clone parameters. On the X and Y axis, you can plot a lot of different things. And it does give statistical data for every single colony the software recognizes in that particular picking. And you also have this ability to do batch picking. It's a feature that we didn't really use but then you do have the ability to, instead of analyze plate one by one, you do have the ability to analyze 10 plates at one time and then rank all the clones from the 10 plates and going back and rank those and pick those ones. You do have the choice to do that. Okay, so now this is, now I'm showing a cell population that we set for the fusion pick, the criteria. So this is optimized for the fusion pick. This x-axis will be the area, and the y-axis will be the fluorescent intensity. So for fusion, the proximity and irregularity is kind of a less of a problem for us. We really want a clone that's growing really well, reasonable size, not too big, reasonable size, and secrete a lot of antibodies. So that will be the fluorescent. So size and fluorescent intensity will be very important for us. So you can see from here, we set certain criteria, and then the green colonies will be the one that we picked. Now, the same population of cells. This one is optimized for cloning. So for cloning, proximity is a big factor for us because we want the cell to be clonal. So we don't want the cells to be, close to a bunch of others. So when we pick like 2 or 3 cells at one time. So we really want the cell that's really by itself in the center, getting a little bit away from everybody else. And also, of course, secreting reasonable amount of antibody. So now you can see most of the green colonies here, now they're pink already from here. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but most of them are pink because of proximity, and they will only pick in the green ones up here, which matches with that criteria of proximity. Okay, so this is an example of that antibody I was talking about. So we were developing this antibody specific to the phosphorylation site on protein X. And the antigen is a phospholipeptide, and then we're counter-screening on the non-phospholipeptide. Both fusion and cloning were done using the ClonePix-FL. And we set up different parameters for fusion and also for the cloning. And here's So this is the fusion image after 7 days. I'm sorry, I picked this one for a reason. Okay, so this is 7 days after seeding view under the white light. So you can see there's one huge colonies here growing, and there are a bunch of small ones. And then this is under the fluorescent light. You can see there, that big one right here is not very fluorescent. And then this one right here is, it's very small, it's very tiny, but it has a nice fluorescent halo. So let me see. So this is the same image here, okay? We have one green, which means that's the clone that we wanted. The parameters we're looking at here is the sizes, either too big or too small, or irregularity, which composed of either the compactness or roundness, and also proximity, which will be the distance, and the phase value, which would be the fluorescent intensity. And we picked, you can see from the numbers that we care about the area, so we don't want things to be too small from a fusion because that could be a dead cell or it could be a B cell. So, and also the other things, it doesn't really matter for us at this moment. The phase value had to be a certain one. So this is the only one we produced. We wanted, we picked. The big cells that you saw here before, like this one right here, we didn't pick it because it's not very fluorescent, so it's probably a low producer or it got lost. So this is for the fusion. This is for the cloning. Okay, if not almost all the cases, the cloning picture is much beautiful than the fusion picture. Because this time we already have like a nice parental clone that's already, we know it's secreting antibodies. So you can see the nice colonies of white, the white colonies under the white light. And then this is the fluorescent, under the fluorescent light. So you can see that almost every single one is fluorescent, is positive. Probably for this one is not. But this is how the picture looks like. And in terms of the selection criteria, let's see. So here we still care about the cell size. We don't want it to be too small. That means the cell growing too slow. We don't want that. The Phe value has to be very high. That means we secrete a reasonable amount of antibody. The proximity, this time we set it really high. In theory, if the proximity is, we need to set the proximity for cloning at 1 or above, which is 1 millimeter and above. In that case, we can pretty much assume that this clone is, clonal with no other cells there will be picked. Okay, so from this fusion, we got 7 parental clones. That's a positive using ELISA, 1 loss activity. 5 of them showed they're reactive to both phospho and non-phosphopeptides, so they're not specific. We only got 1 clone 10E3 that's specific towards the phosphopeptide. I'll be talking about this colony later. It's kind of interesting. So all 6 clones are stabilized by cloning, which were done on the ClonePix. Okay, now I'm going to talk about those 2 specific applications the ClonePix FL helped us to overcome the rescue mission to rescue the unstable clones and also the picking of the high producers. Okay, so this is the one very, very headed clones we worked with. This clone is actually the best clone we had for that particular project, but it was very, very unstable. It took us 4 limiting dilutions, and we were unable to pretty much stabilize it. After 4, this is like limiting dilution. Each one will be taking like 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. So 4 is already taking us almost 2 months to try to stabilize that clone. So after the first round, it's 8.6% positive. After the second round, 12%. After the third round, 18%. After the first round, 1 subclone is already lost completely. The other one is 37.5%. So at that moment, we just say, no, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to do it on ClonePix. So we picked this one, which is the most stable at that time, and when we use it on the ClonePix. So we did 3 subclonings after that using the ClonePix. Dropped a little bit in the beginning, and then after that, it jumped up to 75% positive, and then to 100% positive. And this particular clone remained stable. And we had ascites made of that. That means, it must be stable because if we're able to expand to that extent. Now let's talk about that high producer. Remember that 10E3 clones I will talk to you about? Is the only clone I got from that phospho project. I don't know whether you can see. This is a fluorescent image of it. So you can see it's very, very faint. That means it's not a good producer. So we really want something a little bit better than this. So we did 1 round of subcloning, and then we look at 500 colonies and we rank them. So this is a ranking I talked about earlier. This will be the area, and this will be the fluorescent intensity. So you want something reasonable size and secrete a lot of antibodies. So you pick something here. We didn't pick those 2. Those are too small. They might never grow up. So something here. And then from this one, we got 6 subclones. And then these are the growth curves and also the viability. You can see that they have very similar growth patterns and also viability. From just the first round of cloning, we got 2 subclones, 10E3.1.11 and 13. They're 2-folds in terms of IgG concentration compared to the parental one. And then we got the other 4, which is 1.5%, 1.5% fold higher in production. So we only look at 500. If we're going to really want a higher producer, we could look up to 10,000 clones. That would give us a much better range. Or we could just pick one of these and do another round of cloning. Then the production will really jump up. So in summary, we were able to increase our productivity by approximately 50% and decrease the time by more than 50%. We can save the unstable clones. We decrease the time to stabilizing them. And traditionally, we screen about 1,500 hybridoma wells for fusion. And now with the ClonePix FL, we can routinely screen about 4,500 to 9,000 white light colonies. And if necessary, we'll be able to do more. And this machine actually allowed us to, pick single colonies, have the highest normalized intensity, which is, the intensity divided by the size. And then we can pick the colony that is the highest antibody secretor. We've also found that even we set the criteria pretty loose from fusion, the chances that we're picking a single cell from a fusion is very high. So we're kind of eliminating the chances that we have like non-producing colonies right next to it, and that will overgrow to kind of overgrow the secreting colony, like if we're plating out in the 96 well plates. So, and also because we automated the whole screening and cloning process, I don't have to sit in the hood for like 5 hours and then do it for 3 weeks. So it really saved us a lot of labor, saved us from injury, and also we're freed us to do some other like assay development and more characterization work. Okay, so it's the people that work with me. Robin and Michael, and also Jiping, she's not here, and also the entire tech team, which was under Michael back then, and this is also the other people that work on the leadership team back at that time. Thank you.